How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, I have a beautiful story to share. And I want to dedicate this particular video to my dear father who have passed, and also to my children, because some of my children do listen to my videos and they will understand why. So I'm going to tell this story before we get deeper into this queen here. So anyway, my father, I speak of my father quite a bit, and my father was a very dominant force in my life. I am his only child, so we spent a lot of time together. And so my father had a very tough exterior. He was no one to play with, but my father was very kind to me. My father never put his hands on me, and I never crossed my father. Just his sheer energy, I had the utmost respect for my father. But I learned something about my father once I began to have my own children. And I seen a softness in my father. So when my oldest daughter, who's 30 plus years old, she would follow my father all over the place, just like I did. And so my oldest daughter couldn't say granddaddy, so she called him Nanny. And all of my children called their grandfather Nanny. Now, that's a running joke in our family because as tough as my father is, and my children would fully understand. So my father never told his grandchildren not to say Nanny. He liked it. It was something that he liked, and it was amazing because I didn't know that side of my father. So my royal babies, and I have 4, 2 girls and 2 sons, they soften up my father. And I mean, even in the public, Nanny, Nanny, Nanny. So I dedicate this, pretty much like I said again, to my father and to my royal babies. So anyway, let's get into it. So we're talking about our Queen of Maroons, which some of us know and some of us may not know. And she comes from Jamaica. And since this inspired me to do this, since the movie out of Birth of a Nation, they give the impression that slavery was something that we agreed with. And I have often thought, if I was put in that position, being a slave, what would I do back then? Well, given the type of spirit that I have, I don't even think I would have made it off of the continent of Africa. I don't think so. But if I did, I would have been very hard to deal with, because I don't like to be shackled down, and I don't like shackling down other people. And we have enough mental shackles that we have to deal with. So sometimes I cannot fully fathom what our royal family went through during slavery, because slavery wasn't just in America. So once I started studying about slavery, I found out it never ever was a smooth transition. We was always having uprisings. They don't talk about them all. They don't even talk about those African ships that were turned back around and made them back to the motherland. They don't talk about that because they don't never ever want to put us in a light like we have accomplished anything. Like our kings are not capable, or our queens are not capable. We are a very superior race. And I have to say, and I'm not saying this proudly, we were truly built to deal with the tyranny that they continue to reign on the royal family. I don't know no other race that can deal with this. And I'm not proud to say that. I'm not even humble about that. I got all kind of emotions about that. And I know that you may have the same emotions that I have. But to enlighten the royal family even further, we're going to talk about our queen. Some of the Jamaicans call her Granny Nanny, or Nanny, or Nanny of the Maroons. I'm going to call her Queen Nanny because I love saying queen and I love saying king. So, when it comes to our history, I had to dig. So I'm going to present this to the royal family to the best of my ability. There will be an article in the description box to read, and I would encourage the royal family to do more research because they say we don't read. I'm highly dyslexic. I read anyway. I'm not going to stop reading. Even if I mess up, I'm going to keep pushing. So with that said, I'm going to play 2 videos, and then we're just going to get into it. So let's present our queen, Nanny.
Maroons. This story is one of the most historical events that took place during the 18th century. Nanny of the Maroons was born in West Africa in 1686. She was one of many children and was said to be a member of the Ashanti tribe. She and her brothers were captured and brought to the Caribbean through the Atlantic slave trade. Her, amongst several slaves, were brought to the island of Jamaica. Jamaica, formerly known as Santiago, is an island within the Caribbean Sea and south of the United States. It is the 3rd largest island of the Greater Antilles. It lies south of Cuba and west of Haiti and Dominican Republic. The island was the home of the native indigenous Arawak and Tajanos. Jamaica was under the Spanish rule following the discovery of Christopher Columbus in 1494. It remained one of the possessions of Spain until 1655. England conquered the island and renamed it Jamaica. Under British rule, Jamaica became the leading exporter of sugar with its plantation economy and the imports of slaves from Africa. Upon arrival in Jamaica, Nanny and her brothers were sold to a plantation owner in St. Thomas Parish. During this time, there were several attempts at revolts by the slaves within the Caribbean and South America, as well as the Americas. Many of these attempts resulted in death and not successful. One night, while making an attempt to escape, Nanny and her 4 brothers, Akapung, Kujo, Johnny, and Kwa, ran away and escaped in the area we now call Blue Mountain, or north of the parish of St. Thomas. This movement by Nanny and her siblings would spark the beginning of years of rebellions on the island. While hiding, Nanny and her brothers split up amongst the rebels and formed small Maroon communities throughout the island. In order to survive, the towns would partake in maintaining their own properties and form communities. Nanny became one of the most noted Maroon organizers. Her communities and rebels fought consistently with the former capturers. For many years, the men and women of the Maroon cities also, along with the Tahano and Arawak natives, would fight and unite against the British. This is the time the Nanny of the Maroons started to rebel and raid nearby slave plantations and help release other slaves who joined their community. In fear of losing their slaves, many Europeans fought to destroy the small communities of free slaves. Nanny was often commended for her years of defending her community and was rumored to have an advantage due to African practice of obeah. Nanny would maintain her freedom throughout the span of her adult life. It is said that she formed one of the largest Maroon communities in the island and helped free 1,000 slaves in Jamaica. Her influence was massive and resulted in many vicious results against the British. Many of them took place after her death. It is legend that the Maroons on this island actually fought their way back to West Africa. This story proved to be very true. Between the time of 1796 and 1800s, 550 Maroons were deported from Jamaica after years of Maroon wars and lived in Nova Scotia. As a result, many of them in the 1800s were sent back to Sierra Leone. Nanny of the Maroons died a free woman in 1733 and was able to maintain her freedom and the freedom of her community. To this day, the towns created by the Maroons can still be found throughout Jamaica. Nanny of the Maroons is not only noted as one of the Caribbean's fiercest revolutionists, she is one of the most noted women in Caribbean history. Years after her death, the island slaves were fully emancipated in 1838. The island itself became independent from the United Kingdom in August 6, 1962. This is a brief history of Nanny of the Maroons.
Okay.
Nanny of the Maroons.
I'm going to go over to the next video. And just to let you know, y'all might hear a little bit of the same stuff, but you know, when it comes to finding about anything about the royal family, we have to kind of piece it together.
Situated somewhere between mystic and martyr, rebel and myth, priestess and warrior, Queen Nanny of the Maroons occupies one of the few positions recognized as a Jamaican national hero. Queen Nanny, or Granny Nanny, as she was affectionately called, has largely been ignored by historians who have given more of their focus to male figures in Maroon history. Despite being mentioned only 4 times in written historical text, and usually in somewhat derogatory terms, Queen Nanny is held in the highest esteem among the Maroons. She was the spiritual, cultural, and military leader of the Windward Maroons. Queen Nanny's legacy lies in the fact that she guided the Maroons through the most intense period of their resistance against the British between 1725 and 1740. There are contradicting reports of Queen Nanny's arrival in Jamaica. One report states that she arrived from the African tribe of either Ashanti or Akan as a free woman, perhaps with slaves of her own. The most consistent reports state that she was sold into slavery with her family, who were brought across the Middle Passage and delivered to the plantations of St. Thomas Parish, Jamaica. As a child, Queen Nanny strained under hard labor in the sugar fields until she and her brothers escaped into the Blue Mountains. Nanny, along with her brothers, Akapong, Kujo, Johnny, and Kwai, became known for their bravery in leading the Maroons in resistant rebellion against the British ruling over Jamaica. Queen Nanny escaped into the mountainous landscape of Jamaica and was instrumental in forming a community of free women, men, and children which became known as the Maroons. Maroon was originally a term that referred to runaway farm animals, mainly cattle. Soon the term spread throughout the region to identify slaves who had successfully escaped from the plantations of the whites. Therefore, the Maroons in Jamaica were a problem for the colonists. From the time the British seized Jamaica from the Spanish in the middle of the 17th century, wars were fought over the capture and control of Maroons. The core of the Maroon settlement was the valuation of women and their contribution to Maroon survival. Since women played such an integral role of Maroon development in strategic battle defenses, it is no surprise that one of the most famous Maroon leaders to emerge from the pages of history is a woman. By 1720, Queen Nanny had taken full control of the Blue Mountain rebel town, which was later named Nanny Town. Even though images depict her as a young black woman, Queen Nanny was a small, wiry woman with piercing eyes who was probably in her 60s. Both legends and documents refer to her as having exceptional leadership qualities. Queen Nanny was particularly skilled in organizing the guerrilla warfare, and her military genius was unparalleled. For example, Queen Nanny incorporated the use of camouflage, using branches and leaves wrapped around warriors' bodies to blend in with the environment. She instructed her soldiers to stand as still as possible so that they would resemble trees. Another military strategy was a communication system based on the cadences of drums and abangs, also known as horns, which were unintelligible to the enemy. The knowledge of Queen Nanny's spiritual beliefs also provided an element of psychological warfare, which struck terror in the hearts of the enemy. There are many legends told of Queen Nanny. One story is of a huge cauldron of boiling liquid that she strategically placed on a mountain trail on the way to Nanny Town. The pot was said to be boiling, even though there was no fire beneath the pot. British soldiers approaching would curiously look inside and die. Each soldier coming up the single file path would meet with the same end, except for the last one, who Queen Nanny would save. The last soldier was sent back to tell his general what he witnessed. Contemporary historians maintain that the pot contained special herbs with anesthetic properties. Being a skilled herbalist, Nanny prepared the cauldron, knowing as the soldiers approached, they would inhale the vapors and become drugged to their death. The most famous legend about Queen Nanny takes place during 1737, at the height of the Maroon resistance against the British. Queen Nanny and her people were near starvation. When she was on the brink of surrendering to the British, she heard voices from her ancestors telling her not to give up and wait one more day. When she woke up the next morning, she found 3 pumpkin seeds in her pocket, which she planted on the hillside. Within a week, the seeds grew into large plants loaded with pumpkins that provided much-needed food for the starving community. To this day, one of the hills near Nanny Town is known as Pumpkin Hill. It was said that Queen Nanny could turn into an invisible bird to spy on the enemy and strike them from a distance. Some reports state she wore bracelets and anklets made from the teeth of British soldiers. Mystery even surrounds Queen Nanny's death. It is commonly believed that she met an untimely death at the instigation of the British in 1734. Other accounts say that she died in 1750 of old age. Queen Nanny of the Maroons is the kind of character one sees in modern-day action movies or reads about in a superhero comic strip, except for 2 differences. She was a black African female and a real person. Her intelligence, strength, confidence, mysticism, and guerrilla warfare strategies were far from fiction. Queen Nanny is described as a physically small but powerful woman with the courage to hold back British armed soldiers, lead slave rebellions, and build a healthy community. She was credited with being the single figure who united the Maroons across Jamaica and played a major role in the preservation of African culture and knowledge. The government of Jamaica declared Queen Nanny a national heroine in 1975, and a memorial was erected. Her portrait is on the 500 Jamaican dollar bill, which is colloquially referred to as a nanny. The Windward Maroons, with Queen Nanny as their leader, are role models for resistance, rebellion, and survival. Queen Nanny herself is a symbolic figure for all those who suffer from oppression. National heroine Queen Nanny stands out in history as the only female among Jamaica's national heroes. Therefore, Queen Nanny is the true Queen of Jamaica.
Okay, my royal family. That was a beautiful story. Let me get this out of here. And this will be the article that I will put in the description about box. And y'all seen the picture, the Jamaican's true queen, Nanny of the Maroons. And the thing that stood out for me was this queen and her brothers. They kept fighting. They kept fighting back. And they don't want to tell these stories that we can overcome them, because you can imagine the tyranny they were under. And they don't talk about the slavery that they had in Jamaica. See, Jamaica, they didn't even have slavery back then. Well, they were getting there in this country, but it was a little bit harder because of the terrain, and I said that before. And so these white folks went over to Jamaica to really understand slavery so they could have a better, unquote, success. I know that's sick to say that, but it is what it is. And I have the most respect for Queen Nanny and her brothers. And she is even honored enough for they put her on the highest note that they have in circulation in Jamaica. So that speaks volumes about Queen Nanny and her accomplishments. And let's please don't leave out her brothers as well. And these are the things that I want to share on the True Royal Family so we can understand our royalty. Some people laugh at the title of this channel, and I take those words that I say very serious. We are the only royalty on this planet. No one else is. They stole everything from us. Remember that. Remember what they continue to keep doing to us. And what we must do is have the spirit like Queen Annie, the spirit like Nat Turner, the spirit like John Horace, the spirit like Harriet Tubman, and I could go on and on and on. We are that grand and we are that great, because I know I am, and I know you are too. I keep telling y'all, and I'm going to say it constantly, you are wise, you are brilliant, you are superior, but always remain humble and keep a spiritual base. So with that said, my royal family, Ashe.